in order to pass Reagan's program. And we did. Plus, and I did a movie on Reagan. We went out to the ranch and we saw the table where in August he signed the tax cuts. And it was to the House. I had to get Bill Clinton's signature. I could make speeches forever. But if I wanted to get something done, I had to get his signature. If he wanted to get something done, he had to get me to schedule it. Pretty tough negotiating. And we ended up with welfare reform. 2 out of every 3 people went back to work or went to school. Child poverty declined as parents earned a living. We passed the first tax cut in 16 years, the largest capital gains tax cut in history, and the result was unemployment dropped to 4.2%. 11 million new jobs were created. We then signed the 1997, the Balanced Budget Act. For 4 consecutive years, we balanced the budget, paid off $405 billion in debt, and the only 4 years of your lifetime that we have balanced the budget. We insisted on plussing up the intelligence system by $1 billion. The 9/11 Commission called it the Gingrich plus-up and said it was the only time in the 90s that the intelligence community got more money. And George Tenet, the director of the CIA, said without it the system would have broken down. So you can get these things done. So how fast will it turn around? Late on election night, when it is obvious that Obama has been defeated, people will start changing their investment strategies as of that night. With your help, we will elect a Republican Senate and a Republican House, and that means that they will stay in session on January 3rd, and we will begin passing repeal legislation on January 4th, 5th, and 6th, because everybody will know what's coming. We're not sitting around and going, gee, what should we do? We're going to spend the entire time from the election to January getting the bills ready, getting them designed, getting it all put together. Now, when we get to the first day of the presidency, I will sign a series of executive orders. They will all be published by October 1st. They'll be very clear. The first executive order I'm going to sign will abolish all of the White House czars as of that moment. One of the initial executive orders will instruct the State Department to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem as of that day. And let me say about the Keystone Pipeline, an action which tells you how totally out of touch with reality this president is. We have a chance to build a pipeline that makes perfect sense geologically, skip the mountains, come straight down, go to Houston, do it through the United States, create 20 to 50,000 construction jobs. For the next 50 years, have jobs in Houston and Galveston, processing the oil and shipping the oil. And this president vetoes it on behalf of left-wing environmental extremists in San Francisco. It is a totally destructive and dangerous position. It weakens our energy resources, and it sends a signal to the Canadians to form that they are better off to have a partnership with China, building the pipeline due west in Canada to Vancouver and shipping to China, than they are trying to have a partnership with the United States. Well, I want to say publicly, so the Canadians can understand how to schedule. On the 20th of January, I will sign an executive order opening up the pipeline. They can start building it the next day. Those are specific actions. But let me just for a moment take you to a higher point. This is a Lincoln Day dinner. And I want to say something about the party we should be. Not the party we sometimes are, but the party we should be. In 1859, Abraham Lincoln stood at Council Bluffs, Iowa, looked across the Missouri River, and said, we should build a transcontinental railroad. When he said it, we did not have a steel industry big enough to make enough rails. We did not have a locomotive strong enough to cross the Sierra Nevadas. And we didn't have tunneling engineers that were prepared enough to dig the tunnels. 10 years later, in Utah, they drove in the Golden Spike, and the Transcontinental Railroad was completed. But it's a more amazing story than that in terms of the first Republican president. In 1832, at the age of 23, Lincoln runs for the state legislature for the first time. Part of his plank is to build a railroad. Now, the first railroad is built in 1829 by George Stephenson. It's called the Rocket. It's built in Great Britain. The first railroad engine to reach the United States is in 1831. Lincoln has never seen a railroad, but he understands that the prairie's big and walking is slow. And he's read about railroads. And so he campaigned on behalf of progress. Lincoln was somebody who believed in progress. He believed in free markets, entrepreneurs, technology and science, and progress. By 1858, as he is engaged in debates with Douglas, he's riding trains around Illinois. In 1961, a member of the other party, in May, gave a speech. And he said, "We will have a man on the moon before the end of the decade." At that time, we did a movie that includes this in it. And we have Buzz Aldrin, the astronaut, who says, after we show a clip of Kennedy, at that moment, no American had been in orbit. The only person to orbit the Earth was Yuri Gagarin, a Russian. One American had gone suborbital for 3 hours. That was it. And here's a president saying to the whole world, in this decade, we will invent the rockets, train the astronauts, build the instrumentation, create the organizational structures, and we will be on the moon. How many of you remember July of 1969? How many of you remember how proud you felt to be an American that night? How good it felt to see the American flag on the moon? Ronald Reagan understood the power of technology because he'd lived it. His first jobs were in radio when it was illegal to have radio news because the newspapers convinced the politicians that radio had an unfair advantage because it could deliver instantly. He went to Hollywood when Technicolor was brand new and talkies were only a few years old. He went into television, which had been invented during his lifetime. And so Reagan had this deep instinct. This is the 26th anniversary of the failure of the Challenger and the death of Krista McAuliffe and the other astronauts today. And if you go back and look, and in our Reagan film, we have a section of Reagan talking that night to the nation. He doesn't talk about defeat. He doesn't talk about failure. He doesn't talk about turning back. He talks about heroism, courage, the spirit of pioneering, the desire to move ahead. And he reminds us that it was 390 years earlier on that day that Drake, the great English explorer, had died at sea. And he brought a connection between the age of exploration and the new age of exploration. Several nights ago, on the Space Coast, I outlined a bold, visionary, dramatic opportunity for America. I did it for two very different reasons. One, because we will not turn to our grandchildren and say to them, we are the generation that let the Chinese dominate space, and we're the generation that accepted the decay of the United States because it was just too hard to break out. But there's a second, more positive reason. This is a big country filled with big people. We've always had dreams. We've gone west. We've invented the airplane. We developed the mass-produced car. We built the Panama Canal. We won the entire Second World War in 3 years and 8 months. Think of it. From Pearl Harbor to victory over the Japanese Empire in 44 months. We beat Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and Imperial Japan in 44 months. I believe that our problems are not the people. Our problems are not the spirit of America. Our problems are a regulatory, litigation, special interest system in the state capitals, in the city halls, in the county commissions, and in Washington. And I believe we need a movement. So I would just say to you candidly, I came here tonight, I wear, thanks to Gay Gaines, George Washington's Commander-in-Chief pin. This is the flag that flew at Valley Forge in front of his command headquarters. I wear it to remind myself that when the Constitutional Convention met and wrote the term Commander-in-Chief, the person presiding had been Commander-in-Chief for 8 years. He fought the British for 8 years with 1 week at Mount Vernon. So in the tradition of Washington, who was prepared to stake everything, of Lincoln, who believed passionately in freedom and passionately in a better future, candidly of John F. Kennedy, the Democrat, who launched us into space in a way that we should have continued, and finally of Ronald Reagan, a man who had lived change, believed in change, and through his courage defeated the Soviet Empire, the largest empire the world had ever seen, and did it in 8 years. I came tonight to say to you that I will not ask you to be for me for president. Because if you're for me, you're going to vote and go home and say, I sure hope Newt can fix it. And that is not possible. No person, not even the president, not under our Constitution, can get this done. I came here tonight to ask you to be with me, to stand side by side, to remind the Congress, the governor, the state legislature, the city council, the county commission, the school board, to decide that 537 elected officials in Washington can't turn the country around, but millions of Americans who love this country can turn it around with ease. I pledge to you, in the tradition of our founding document, if you help me next Tuesday, and if with your help I become the nominee, and if as nominee we decisively defeat the left at every level, at president, at House, at Senate, in local governments, that I will give you, for as long as I'm allowed to serve, my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. Together, we are going to give our grandchildren the country they deserve, not the country that currently is decaying. Thank you, good luck, and God bless you.